Week 4 is upon us, so I'm bringing you my rest of season rankings so you know how to evaluate your roster, answering all start sit questions down below. But starting it off in the running back realm, we will start off with the S tier, and we have an elite group of running backs still out there. We got Breece Hall, we got Saquon Barkley, we got Bijan Robinson, and we got Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara. You can kind of dice this how you want. Breece Hall and Saquon Barkley have been absolutely elite for you in fantasy football. Bijan Robinson has kind of left a lot on the bone. Jahmyr Gibbs had a very good week 3. Excited to see where things continue to go in week 4. Jonathan Taylor also had a really great week 3, so you can maybe argue that Jonathan Taylor should be ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. And then rounding out Alvin Kamara in this Clint Kubiak-led offense. You absolutely have to love how the running backs at the top are performing, unless you drafted a little bit of Christian McCaffrey, which I did in a few leagues, and we'll definitely be talking about what to do with him in a second. But then we move on to the A tier, and in our A tier, we got James Cook, we got Devon A. Chain, we got Josh Jacobs, we got Kyron Williams, we got Joe Mixon, and we got Derrick Henry. This is kind of the tier where we're looking at guys that have had elite level volumes, specifically with James Cook, Devon, Josh Jacobs. But James Cook has performed on a fantasy football level. We haven't seen Josh Jacobs do that because of that Jordan Love injury. Devon is playing now in an offense where he's getting elite level snap share, but he's not, of course, in the most efficient level offense, just based on the fact that we are without Tua Tagovailoa. We got Kyron Williams, who we're hoping to see the Rams continuing to improve. He's getting the workload, but we're just thinking that offense, especially over the next few weeks without Cooper Kupp, without Puka Nacua, it's going to hinder him a little bit. We got Joe Mixon coming off of an injury. We'll have to see if he's fully recovered this week or if we're going to have to wait another week on Joe Mixon. And then Derrick Henry, which I'm excited to see Derrick Henry really start to show that overall elite level touchdown upside that we haven't seen yet. But this kind of rounds out my A tier and how I'm viewing things. We move on to the B tier, and we got James Conner, who's been absolutely elite up to this point in the season. Still got Trey Benson we got to worry about later on down the line. So that's a little bit of my worry with James Conner. But this Arizona Cardinals led offense with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, you got to feel good about it. Travis Etienne's playing on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were absolutely struggling. And I think you can make the case that Aaron Jones should go ahead of Travis Etienne at this point in the season. I just had Travis Etienne based on the talent, based on if he gets the volume and this Jaguars team can turn it around. Travis Etienne, I feel like, is very appropriately valued here in the B tier. Like I said, Aaron Jones, he wore that hat last week. Dude is an absolute monster with Sam Darnold, so we're excited to continue seeing that. Kenneth Walker, is he going to play this week with that oblique injury? It's going to be another week with Zach Charbonnet. And then Brian Robinson, who maybe this whole Washington Commanders offense as a whole has been one of the biggest surprises in fantasy football. And then rounding out with Jordan Mason, who we're worried about CMC, but as time continues to go on, Jordan Mason continues to just seem like, hey, he's going to be the RB1 for at least the next 4 to 5 weeks. And that's enough for me to have him here in the B tier. We move on to the C tier, and this is where Christian McCaffrey leads off this tier. And you could maybe make the argument with me that, Caleb, honestly, I wouldn't have CMC here. And I understand. There's the concern with him going to Germany to see type of shots that he can get into that Achilles tendon to see if he can heal it up faster. And especially with getting those shots, you're like, hey, another 4 to 5 weeks. I just think we have to be realistic and talk about the overall upside that there is with Christian McCaffrey, if even he comes back week 10. But I understand that David Montgomery, Ramondre, maybe you prefer those guys at this point over Christian McCaffrey. So would love to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Where are you ranking CMC? I know we as the fantasy football community love to overreact to stuff, so I'm just trying to have an open mindset when it comes to Christian McCaffrey in this overall performance. David Montgomery, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard, J.K. Dobbins, Rachaad White, who this week is going to be without Bucky Irving. It looks like Bucky Irving's going to be out, so I'm excited to see how Rachaad White plays. And then Devin Singletary rounding it out for the Giants. We then move to a big D tier, and in our big D tier here, we got guys like Zach Moss and Jonathan Brooks starting off this tier. We got guys like Najee Harris, Braylon Allen, Zach Charbonnet, Jerome Ford, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Warren, Gus Edwards, Zeke, Chase Brown, Zamir White, Javonte Williams, Isaiah Pacheco, Alexander Madison. There's some guys in this tier where you're like, hey, I might need to cut ship, especially on guys like a Jalen Warren or a Gus Edwards. And so, like, to be completely honest, I lumped a bunch of these guys in there. Like at the top, I kind of do have the rankings, but then when we get past like Jerome Ford and we're talking Mostert, Warren, Chase Brown, it kind of just gets into an iffy territory for me. So like I said, the running back landscape past these elite level guys, we don't love. But moving on to the wide receivers, we got a pretty elite range of wide receivers starting out here. We got Justin Jefferson, who's still my wide receiver 1. Got to give it to him up to this point in the season in the way that he's performing. CeeDee Lamb, who's my wide receiver 2. You drafted CeeDee Lamb as your wide receiver 1, probably first overall or second overall pick. Congratulations Congratulations if you picked him over CMC and you're not stuck in that overall dilemma. But then I do have the rookie Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is on an absolute heater right now in fantasy football. We're talking about elite level stuff. So I bumped Malik Neighbors over Jamar Chase and over Rashee Rice. And last week in our rest of season rankings video, a lot of you said, hey, Rashee Rice should not be over Amon-Ra St. Brown or AJ Brown. Well, this week I'm doing it again. Rashee Rice, I think arguably should be ahead of Jamar Chase. I think that's an argument that should be being made right now. But this is kind of my S tier. This is my elite level wide receiver tier. Let me know what you think of it down below. We move on to the A tier, and we got Marvin Harrison Jr. We got Garrett Wilson. We got Nico Collins, Chris Olave, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Devontae Smith to lead off this tier. And I think as we go, we realize that in this tier, like Marvin Harrison Jr. has had weeks, Nico Collins had some elite weeks, Garrett Wilson we're hoping has elite weeks, Chris Godwin's been absolutely performing, Devontae Smith's been performing without AJ Brown. The elite level S tier guys, like it feels like in every position group, there's the ultimate level studs, and the depth that we kind of thought was going to be happening this year in fantasy football just really hasn't been there. So let me know what you think of this A tier. Chris Godwin, should we put Chris Godwin above Chris Olave, Nico Collins? I think that's an interesting level decision that was going through, but Marvin Harrison Jr. for sure leading off this tier, Garrett Wilson, Nico Collins, and then maybe there is like a small mini tier between Chris Godwin and Chris Olave, kind of with how I have things viewing here. But like we said, then we are going to move on to our B tier of wide receivers, and we got Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, and Zay Flowers. And maybe Tyreek Hill should be lower than DK Metcalf, Devontae Adams, Drake London rest of the season. I think this projection for me with Tyreek Hill was me just being realistic and saying, hey, what if they bring in someone? Like, can Tyreek Hill make it do? And I think when you're looking at guys like a Drake London or Brandon Ayuk, I think 100% that's kind of the realm for Tyreek Hill. Now, maybe I should have put DK Metcalf ahead of Tyreek Hill just based on the overall situation, but I think the Dolphins at some point are going to figure out just a decent level quarterback. I'm not saying, not even like maybe like QB 27, QB 26, and that's going to be enough for Tyreek Hill in this Mike McDaniel offense to do it. But if you do have Tyreek Hill, you're definitely panicking because it has not looked good without Tua, and there's no hope in sight. We move on to the C tier, and in our C tier here, we got a load of guys. We got Deebo Samuel, we got Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, George Pickens, Jameson Williams, Jaden Reed, Amari Cooper, and T. Higgins. And you can kind of just dissect this any way you really want to. Major thing for me is with Deebo Samuel is him coming off this injury whenever it does happen. I know Juwan Jennings looked absolutely great this last week, but Deebo Samuel really to me is still going to push Brandon Ayuk for that number one overall spot for the 49ers. Deontay Johnson is an absolute target hog with no Bryce Young and Andy Dalton. I think bigger and better days are ahead for Deontay Johnson. DJ Moore, George Pickens. George Pickens kind of has a little bit of the Arthur Smith curse on him right now. Jameson Williams still competing with Sam Laporta, but absolutely outperforming him as the second best wide receiver on that Detroit Lions offense. We then got Jaden Reed, who we're expecting to really blast off. I think Jaden Reed could be higher if Jordan Love had played more this season. Amari Cooper and then T. Higgins to kind of round out this overall S tier. And we move on to the D tier, and we got guys like Jalen Waddle. I realized I put T. Higgins in here twice, so put T. Higgins in the C tier. That's where I have him. I'm an absolute idiot. But then we got Xavier Worthy, JSN, Tank Dell, Terry McLaurin, Brian Thomas, and Romo Dunze. Romo Dunze looked good. So maybe my hype and ideology with Tank Dell is having me push him a little bit too high in my overall wide receiver rankings. So that's definitely something that could be happening. But when we're looking at these are, middling wide receiver twos that can give you spike weeks, but I don't have any expectations that these guys are really going to be pushing wide receiver one overall territory, or even like back early wide receiver two territory. The only player in this range that I might consider is going to be Rome Odunze for the Chicago Bears, because he did just have a massive target share in week 3 fantasy football. And after seeing what Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. is doing, I mean, let's not forget Rome Odunze was a top 10 drafted QB. So I do have Rome here in the D tier. We move on to the E tier, and the E tier is a little bit bigger. We got Rashid Shaheed, we got Calvin Ridley, we got Jerry Jeudy, we got Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Like we said, we got to add these injured level guys here. We got Keenan Allen, Khalil Shakir. Calvin Ridley, I think, can gain the most value in this tier just based on if Will Levis can kind of improve. Cooper Kupp, of course, if Puka Nacua comes back healthy like week 8, Cooper Kupp comes back healthy like week 6, week 7, we could definitely start to boost them back up the rankings. Immediately when those guys step back onto the field, they instantly get pushed back up into at least the B tier. But like I said, we do have to see these guys healthy, and since they are battling injuries, they are hurting your overall depth on your roster. We move on to the F tier, and the F tier is a little bit bigger of a tier. We got Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, Keon Coleman, Jordan Addison, hopefully first week back off injury. 3, Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, Cortland Sutton, and Xavier Legette. And we're just going to continue moving through. And this is my kind of final big G tier. Darnell Mooney, Demarcus Robinson, Brandon Cooks, Jacoby Myers, Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, Greg Dortch, Jalen McMillan, Adam Thielen, and Wan'Dale Robinson to round out my overall wide receivers. Now let's dive into the tight ends. We're going to start it off here in the S tier with Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta. Now tight end has been an absolute crapshoot, and you guys know this, and I know this. Brock Bowers is the clear tight end 1, so shout out to you if you drafted him in round 8, round 9. You're winning right now. Dalton Kincaid had himself an okay day on Thursday Night Football. We're still hoping that Travis Kelce starts to emerge. There's talks of trying to get him more involved. They've been trying to get him involved, but defenses are just taking him away. Trey McBride's dealing with that concussion, and then Sam Laporta dealing with that lower ankle sprain. So all of these guys have their warts besides Brock Bowers. So definitely not the most ideal situation if you went early round tight end this year. But this is how I have the S tier. We move on to the A tier, and I still have Mark Andrews here in the A tier ahead of Isaiah Likely. And like we said, we're getting a little bit nervous. He was in our panic video yesterday. I still feel confident Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Evan Ingram as these top tier guys in the A tier. Not that they're providing great value. Evan Ingram and George Kittle are dealing with injuries. Kyle Pitts has been touchdown or bust. Mark Andrews, 33% snap share last week, put up a big old nothing burger. Isaiah Likely's been struggling. Mike Gesicki, honestly, you could maybe argue should be ahead of Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely, but this is kind of how I have it currently right now. Like we said, tight ends are super hard to evaluate. Look at our B tier. We got Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Pat Fryermuth, Hunter Henry, David Njoku. If he can start to get things going, coming back healthy, we're excited about that. TJ Hawkinson and maybe Jake Ferguson, I should have pushed higher. I think Jake Ferguson could definitely be at the beginning of this B tier and honestly potentially should be pushing the A tier. But like I said, right now when we make these rankings, there's a lot for us to discuss when we're looking at rest of the season, and we've all seen how kind of tight end has been a crapshoot. We move on to quarterbacks, and the biggest addition for me right now is I put Jaden Daniels as my QB3 in fantasy football. And listen, he's been absolutely masterful. I think the fact that Jaden Daniels has done what he's done on a points per game basis, considering the fact that Cliff Kingsbury really wasn't calling any significant passes downfield, and Jaden Daniels and this Washington Commanders offense wasn't having success throwing the ball downfield. They were doing a ton of bubble screens, a ton of slants, a ton of read option, which is all great for Jaden Daniels. And we love the Konami code quarterback upside. It provides a very great floor. But when this passing attack really starts going, Jaden Daniels instantly gets slided up into my S tier. I might be overreacting. I might be overreacting when Josh Allen went absolutely superhuman this last week. Still had Patrick Mahomes a spot ahead of Jaden Daniels. I pushed Jalen Hurts out of my top 3 to my top 4. Lamar Jackson has looked really good as well. Kyler Murray. I feel very good about all these quarterbacks in the S tier. I think they give you a chance to win week in and week out. But let me know what you think of Jaden Daniels. Am I smoking? Am I drinking that rookie Kool-Aid? Move on to the A tier. And CJ Stroud gets bumped out, been absolutely struggling. Anthony Richardson's been struggling. And maybe Joe Burrow should be the one to cap off and lead this tier. I just like the offensive weapons a little bit better than the Houston Texans offense. But Joe Burrow has really performed for fantasy football the last 2 weeks. So shout out to Joey B. We got Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, and Jordan Love, assuming that he's going to be coming back healthy here over the next 2 weeks. I think Jordan Love, you have to add him back here in the A tier. We move on to the B tier, and the B tier is a big tier. We got Justin Fields leading it off, that Konami code level upside, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and then we get to these guys in this back end of tier of like Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, which are all struggling. We all think they're talented quarterbacks. They have struggled. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, arguably, you should put Matthew Stafford ahead of him. I think that's definitely a case that could be made. I really just put the lack of weapons for Matthew Stafford behind Trevor Lawrence, but I think we could definitely debate that overall here in the B tier. And then we have Aaron Rodgers to round out the B tier. And my last and final tier is going to be the C tier quarterbacks. We got Kirk Cousins, we got Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, and then I added Tua in case somehow Tua does come back this season. If you like fantasy football, we will be going live tonight. We will be going live on Saturday night to answer all your start sit questions. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. On the way to 4,000 subscribers. Appreciate you guys so much. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks so much. Peace.